Sarah,
Hi, James.
how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm kind of in an excited spin as my new website and all of the stuff that I'm throwing up online is starting to everything is starting to roll. So I'm like, ah. But what I'm really excited about is actually getting to sit down and talk to you and share. We've had some really fun and deep conversations around your work and around the experience of that. And I just really wanted to share that with the audience that I'm attempting to build and the bit of audience that I do have. This is really an attempt to have these kind of homegrown conversations with somebody who's not necessarily like a super famous something or another and selling $1 million projects, but like your everyday person and what we all go through and how we feel and just the really amazing cool people that I've met in my life, and you're one of them, even though relatively new. So um first off, why don't you just tell me a little bit about your development as a professional filmmaker, documentarian, if you can do that in some sort of synopsis, but you have the floor.
Yeah, sure. Well, you mentioned that you're wanting to do interviews with just normal everyday people, which is funny because I've never been labeled a normal everyday person, pretty much ever. I've had a really unique life, unusual from the age of 6. My mom took us down to live in the South Pacific of Tonga and really wanted us to live. She believed that if you chose to live in someone else's country, you should also choose to live their way of life.
Mm,
And that's the beginning of my unique life, of being very observant of indigenous people, different ways of life, how people engage with their utensils, if they even use many of them for eating food, or using tools to gather food. So I've had a curiosity about different ways of life since I was a young child. And I started working as a wilderness guide in 2004. I was living in Montana, and I was really interested in helping people engage with the natural world, being inspired by it, healing from it, and expressing curiosity and learning in a really somatic and engaged way. And after my first summer of guiding in Montana, I knew that was my path for at least a while. And I met someone who was working as a guide in Alaska. And that was on my bucket list of wanting to live in the most wild states in the United States, which were what I had written down was Colorado, Montana, and Alaska.
mhm.
Luckily, Alaska was last because I fell in love with it. And I was a wilderness guide for 9 years before I became a documentary filmmaker. And my path was that, well, in a lot of different ways, but I got a master's degree in cross cultural studies. So I didn't go to film school. I focused on how to work collaboratively with indigenous communities and tribes to make films. And my approach to my filmmaking is fairly unique, is the feedback I'm getting. I didn't really know. It's very homegrown for me. But I love what I do, and my filmmaking is very much a part of my life. My work is not this exterior thing. It's incorporated and meshed in all of what I do, very intentional. I feel like kind of chosen path for me. So I've been making documentaries for a little more than 10 years and ended up wilderness guiding for 15 years. I kind of had some overlap there. So it's been an exciting adult life, I have to say. Yeah.
But it also sounds like a pretty exciting and interesting childhood in many ways. And that's part of the desire and design of this podcast is to reveal this kind of unique beauty that so many people live. Their lives are these just incredible landscapes, and oftentimes we just don't know that because we haven't taken the time to sit down and talk to somebody. So thank you for sitting down and talking to me. This is amazing. I think one of the places that we connected was, I grew up in Alaska, and then I found out that you worked there and developed this relationship with Alaska and with the indigenous communities there, and the wilderness. I mean, so I'll just briefly say, like, one of the things that I know has affected my life, my whole life, and myself as an artist and as somebody who likes to explore and get out and see new things and engage viscerally, connectively with communities and cultures and languages and people, is growing up in Alaska, because the wildness and the landscape, it just is so vast. It's so huge. It's almost like overwhelming sometimes. I remember having that feeling when I was a kid, just like, and I grew up in it, and it was like, like that, like every day you look at the mountains and the volcanoes and things were going on. So I just am curious, like, what was your sense of, or what is your sense of Alaska in that way, and how you've embodied that?
Yeah. Well, so just looking back on some of your questions and some ideas that I had is that um, just about every Alaskan is so somatically connected to the natural world
Yeah.
because you have to be.
Mhm.
It will knock you on your feet. It'll even kill you if you're not paying attention. And when you said you felt almost overwhelmed as a child looking at the wilderness, it's because it doesn't end. It goes on and on as further as you can see in any direction. And there's many different climates. There's Southeast Alaska, there's South Central, there's the Arctic, there's the subarctic, there's coastal, there's interior. But no matter what, you're surrounded by a wilderness that is so powerful. It's like this powerful God,
Mhm.
it's and the only way to survive in it is to be connected. And so I found that through guiding, I had to be so aware through my body so that I could keep other people alive. My first many summers were in Southeast Alaska. And so I'm kayaking in tidewater glacier fed inlets. I'm surrounded by some of the tallest mountains in the world, incredibly cold ocean water, waves, giant bears, black bears, grizzly bears, moose, wolverines, whales,
Right.
and feeling this through my body and getting a sense, well, how long can I be out? How long can we kayak, for instance?
Mhm.
You're feeling that wind on your skin, on your hands as you punch through with your paddle. And what do you need? Do you need something to cover that? And the gloves is a good example. So I always wore gloves, but I needed to feel my paddle. I wanted to feel my fingers on there. So what I wore were these hand gloves, and the ends were open, and my fingers would get cold, but it helped me feel connected to my paddle that was like my life way. I couldn't lose my paddle, or I would drift out in sea and never come back, you know? But I had to be aware, how do my knuckles feel in my hands? And if I'm getting really cold, these inexperienced people, I need to be able to recommend to them how to sustain themselves for 8 hours a day in the wilderness while I'm taking them out off of the ship. And so being aware of the wind on my face, and do we need to cover something up? I've spent many years in the Arctic, and you have to cover every little square inch, because even after seconds, you can get frostbite from that piercing wind. And so not only that, but because it's an endless wilderness and wildness, a lot of Alaskans hunt and they gather food and they fish. Most people I know do, indigenous and non-indigenous. It's the way of life up there. And in some cases, you can't afford to live in these communities unless you hunt and gather, because food is getting imported from the lower 48 and it's extremely expensive by the time it gets to these remote villages, many of which don't have roads leading to them. And so being even more aware of your own sound of your body. If you're needing to hunt a caribou, and for anyone who's a hunter, you know, you have to be very quiet and you have to listen. And through my experience of being a guide and being quiet around animals so that we can see them and enjoy them, but spending a lot of time with hunters as a filmmaker, just getting kind of shifting my gears on listening to the elder, the wise one who's sharing with me, but also listening to the sounds of nature so that now I know what's happening. And so I guess what I've learned is the most important is coming into a new area, whether it's the wilderness or to an indigenous tribe, of being quiet, listening to the pace of that person, allowing for the sound of breath from that person, gaining a sense for how they communicate. It's not just words. And what I have found is that when a wise elder is sharing, so much is shared, not through words. And if words are shared, they're very thoughtful and intentional and based on a deep knowing. And so to try to embody that myself, like I want to sit here and witness the pace of this person, and out of respect to try to follow that rhythm, because I need to sit here and learn from this person. So, somatically, you could say that just trying to breathe, yourself and being humble and just listening. And, also learning so much from gathering food, touching it in our hands, wearing those rubber boots and trenching through uneven terrain across the tundra, feeling the pain in your body, the pain that feels so good, because at the end of the day, your basket is going to be filled with berries if you're paying attention. And even though you have pain in your body and you're cold and you're sweating here, but you're cold here, and you're cold here, but you're too hot here, if you come home with a caribou and then you're the one who cuts it up, you see the blood, you cut the fat off, you put it up on your shoulders and trudge out of there with that animal. There's blood on your clothes, you can smell it. And maybe you've canned it, you've dried it, you've hung it out to dry before you process it. And then when that fork puts that food up to your lips, it's a totally different somatic experience when you've been the one to either help or you're the hunter. And that's why it's going into your mouth. And that gratitude and appreciation, all that hard work you went through and the memories, that visceral experience, I would so rather have that experience than go to the store and get a can of oysters or
Yeah.
something like that from someone I don't even know, and it was processed in a factory. I don't have that full body gratitude, appreciation, but when it's from a hunter I know or I've done it, it's a whole body experience. And what I've heard time and time again from indigenous people is that if we forget our ancestral heritage and that deep knowing, we lose touch of ourselves.
Right.
And and then we have dis-ease, we have disassociation and disconnection from ourselves. But when we can take the time to feel that sweat and that pain and all those things, we can have these full body from the fingertips to the arms to the stomach to the feet experience with everything around us.
Yeah.
So it's been an amazing experience transitioning from being a wilderness guide, overlapping there for many years, and then being a documentary filmmaker with and around people that are so deeply connected to the environment.
Wow, Sarah. I mean, first off, that there is just so much there. I mean, we could probably spend several days just unpacking some of that stuff, you know what I mean, about you personally, about somatics, about being in the wilderness, about reconnecting and being connected to nature, to life, to that life force, you know. I mean, I just want to say one thing is like in your tenure in Alaska, you saw and did so much more and know so much more about that state than I do, who grew up there. And within your description, I can feel my childhood experiences. You know, um, I started teaching myself how to hunt and trap. I mean, I got a rifle when I was like 12 years old or something like that from my birthday or Christmas. I can't remember. Went through a whole hunting program in school in the sixth grade. I still have the card that says I'm a certified something or another. And, you know, I never actually trapped an animal. I mean, I was just learning how to do that and then we moved, but I that sense of going out and connecting and looking and listening and like you're looking for the tracks and you're trying to understand the movements of the animals or being out skiing early in the morning and looking up and there's a mother, you know, there's a cow moose like right there eating and there's a baby there and you know viscerally, like I learned this at a very early age, is don't get in between the baby and the mom, you know, don't do that and um, move slow and be and be respectful and it's almost a reverential treatment of nature, you know. So that's one part of it. And then another part that I was hearing, which I think is just incredibly powerful, is being able to notice the sensations, the different sensations in different parts of your body happening all at the same time. You know, one place is hot, one place is cold, one place is sweaty, one place is, you know, whatever it is, and then you have to pee or, you know, whatever, you know, and you're sloshing around in those boots. God, I remember sloshing around in those boots and picking blueberries big as my thumb. You know, it was just such an incredible thing. And then the mosquitoes, you know, and then the all the things that you have to deal with in those deeper environmental or in those deeper wilderness environments. That's what I meant to say. So that's another piece, you know, that whole somatic bit of what it feels like in your body to do these things. And that, I mean, maybe, you know, I'm going to have you talk about this a little bit, you know, to me, and this is what I've learned in my life, is that I can take those experiences and then that applies to everything else that I'm doing. And I can find connection at least to myself, but generally speaking to other people. You know, remember we were in the farmer's market the other day and just walking through there and talking to people and smelling the food and the berries and the fresh things that were coming out of the ground right to that place. You're not having to hunt it down, but it's a really beautiful visceral experience if you can be there with it, right? um yeah, that's another piece that I'd like to have you talk a little bit about, is how all of that experience and that sensation based awareness has translated into where you are now in your urban life, or other experiences that you've had in your life, because I know you lived in Hawaii and you traveled in Central America and more in the world. I'm curious to hear about that at some point too. But yeah, how is that, how has it translated in other parts of your life?
Well, I think, having spent so much time really connected to wilderness. I mean, I grew up in Seattle. I grew up in a city, but um, I always wanted to be outside
Mhm.
and kind of a wild kid. And neither one of my parents were hikers, backpackers. My mom was a little bit in her 20s, but when I was alive, my dad loved snow machines and fast cars and stuff like that. And so my childhood
A
was
different
maybe
visceral experience, but it's there too, right? Yeah.
right. Yeah. But there was something. And I remember, okay, so much of the time my dad would take us to my grandma's house, which was a couple, I would call her the grandma over the mountains. We'd have to drive over the mountains to get to grandma's house, and she lived out in the country. And it was a long drive, and much before smartphones, there's nothing to look at except what was out the window.
Hmm.
I'd look out the window and just dream and fantasize that I could just walk out there and stay out there, be in that wildness. And I never had. It was all in my head. And I would fantasize about what it would be like to just stay in the forest, and do fairies exist, and what would it be like to lay on the moss and to, to touch everything and just engage with the animals. And I so wanted that. And I could say multiple times my dreams came true, and then my dreams came true again, and they came true, just following that somatic awareness, that I desired, that I wanted to be out there and moving my own body than being in a car, or being on a snow machine or a motorcycle or a fast car like my dad wanted.
Mhm.
I knew in my heart what I wanted. And sure, we're all influenced by the way we grow up, for sure. But in the end, we all have our own desires. And so following that led me to kind of living an unusual life of being a guide and working seasonally, maybe up to 6 months a year. And then in my 20s, I would take off and travel internationally so that I could experience other cultures. And really, I was drawn to cultures that were the most different from what I was already aware of and around. So I traveled the Middle East for 3 months, went to Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Israel,
Wow.
on my own, just me and a boyfriend at the time. And I love to spend time just sitting on the street side with someone cooking street food, or just an old man sitting on a chair.
Best, isn't it?
It is. And I never went on an organized tour. That is not something I have any desire to do. I don't want someone to design my experience. I'm a producer, I make films. I love to produce my own experiences in a very organic way. And so, another thing I've loved to do is bike touring. I've done many bike tours. I did a 350-mile loop starting in Oaxaca, Mexico. Um, I've
Wow.
done bike touring on the Big Island, around the San Juan Islands, up in Alaska. I want to do a lot more. But that's a great example of, I want to feel a place, and I want to feel my own body moving through that place. So, Oaxaca, Mexico, super hot, really dry in places. I'm going uphill for 6 miles in the heat. And part of it is torture. My throat hurts, it's dry, I'm sweating profusely, just dripping wet. But I look out, I'm seeing things I've never seen before.
Yes. Yes.
I'm seeing landscapes I've never seen. I see people making orange juice on the side of the road. I hear people speaking in Spanish. The smell is giving me this mixed memory of living in the South Pacific, but with these new smells that I haven't had. And so I'm creating memories as I go, but also remembering my own past experiences. And then, some days it was so hot and so much elevation, I could only go 8 miles in a day. But when I get to that spot, like, wow, I use my own body to get here and really fully appreciating that experience. And then going into the taqueria and getting a taco and watching that woman smash the tortillas, cooking it on oil on this stone, in this very organic
I
way and things with her
you're
hands.
killing me here. I have a story, but I'm gonna
Oh,
keep.
yeah, but just, like, watching her hands and how weathered they are, because she's, like, standing in the sun all day, making tortillas all day, every day for years and years, and
Mm,
she knows tortillas better than anyone, and when that tortilla goes to your lips, and it's hot and it's fresh, and that corn was just ground by her,
yes.
that person right there, you're seeing her, you're connected, and you have a conversation with her. And that experience eating that food is so, again, like, so much more connected, and you could go into, like, um, walking around and it's not designed and you don't know where you're going, you're lost half the time. When you travel like that,
Yep.
you're lost most of the time, right? You don't know where the heck you
You
are.
just don't know where you are. You're not lost.
Right, you know where you're going,
Because
but you
you're
don't know
you're
where you
in
are.
the moment, in the place, and you're feeling it, and you're being aware, and you're staying connected. I just, the tortilla thing, right? So when I first moved to Nicaragua, moved into this place, and in the mornings I kept hearing this like dun 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 dun. I couldn't figure out what it was, and it was just like echo through the whole town, like 5 o'clock in the morning. And finally, I went down and I just followed the sound and ended up in the market. And there's this tortilla factory, and there's probably, I don't know, 30 women in this building on these wooden benches, and they're making that's all they're doing, and they the masa, and they're and that every fucking tortilla that you eat is being touched by somebody else. So there's an intentionality into it. You know what I mean? And then when you go out in the campo and they're making them out of millon, or millet, and different things, and they're bigger and they're thicker, and you're in the homes that are basically wattle and daub, or cob kind of homes, natural. We hear, like, I want to live in a natural home, where they actually do, and they they have to, with the dirt floors and the whole 9 yards, and the corn they grew themselves, and the millet that they grew themselves, and making the tortillas like you were saying, and the smells that and they're cooking inside in these wood fired stoves, which are terrible for their health, but also smell wonderful and bring a certain ambiance and a taste to the food, right? And you've said it several times, just sitting and immersing yourself in the environment that you're in, and the difference between an environment like that and sort of the sterility of many of the urban environments, or kind of like coming back to the States out of a place like that, is just, especially the longer I would be there, was kind of like a slap in the face. There was definitely a reverse cultural, what do they call it, I couldn't get back into the culture for quite a while, and it's just such an amazing experience to do that, and when you were talking about being a kid and wanting to lay in the moss. And I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, actually, when I was growing up in Alaska, and you know how that's moss is like super spongy and it just feels and it's thick and it's just like, oh, it's like, and I would just lay in it as a kid. I would do that actually and just lay in it and just look at the little plants and the little bugs and just smaller and smaller and smaller. And same thing. Are there fairies? Am I going to see like leprechauns come out? Am I going to see, the wood fairies come out? There was times when I could swear something was gonna come. It was such a beautiful, you know,
Well,
magic way to be.
and like you were saying, when you're that connected, it makes me think of I have this joke, but it's not really a joke, that if I ever had to live in the suburbs, and I'm talking like pure suburbia where all the houses look exactly the same, slightly different colors, but they're all the same kind of shape and size.
I know where I'm living right now.
Or maybe, yeah, where you just drive and drive and you just see the same thing. And then maybe you see some stores, but they're all like Pete's Coffee,
Mhm.
Starbucks,
Yep.
chain stores, corporations, that if I had to live there, I would want to slit my wrists.
Mm.
I would not want to live if I had to live like that.
Mhm.
Because to me, Pete's Coffee, Starbucks, those kind of places, they all look virtually exactly the same. They have the same food, the same coffee. The personnel are different, but they're trained to be the same. They're trained to be clones of somebody that was created when Pete's Coffee started, when Starbucks coffee started. And all those parking lots look the same. And all those, if you go to a parking lot and it's like Safeway, Starbucks,
Mhm. Mhm.
Barnes and Noble, you could be in China or you could be in Spain or you could be in the US. They all look exactly the same. They're void of culture, they're void of realness, they're void of connection and immersion. When I walk into places like that and I stay more than an hour, I feel tired. It's almost as if my life force gets disconnected
Mhm.
to the source of the earth and I feel dead. I feel dead inside. Um, and I just refuse to live like that. I have to be I might be so I'm living in Berkeley, California right now, and I'm looking at a place in the Mission in San Francisco.
Nice.
And what I love about San Francisco, and especially the Mission, it's all locally owned shops. And you have people from all over the world. You have people that don't speak English, and so you have to communicate. I have to communicate in this different way. I don't know Spanish. And I love that. It feels so real and connected. This person created this shop.
Mhm.
They
Right.
chose all the things inside and they organically, with their own sweat and tears and sacrifice and risk, built this shop or this restaurant. And it's not some large corporation that looks exactly the same as something else. So I just hope and pray that we stop removing the source energy from planet Earth or we're going to kill ourselves.
And it's been happening for a long time. I mean, there's the debates, for a long, long time around even curating a manicured space, whether it's a park or something like that, or how we curate even the national parks a lot of times, that's really up in like environmental ethics and things like that. It's part of the conversation. But coming back to to like the mini malls and the suburbia and the suburban sprawl and the not only blandness, but the sterility is another word that I would talk. What is an interesting thing for me is to go into those stores and to start making human connection with the baristas, with the checkers with the guy that's stocking the shelves. And it's really interesting because I do feel like I live kind of partially in that space right now here in Bakersfield, and like going up to the Albertsons, because that's like the closest grocery store. And every time I go in, saying hi to the guy that's guarding the door and just kind of making it like, hey, how's your day going? Boy, it smells nice in here. Or, just like having that connection. Well, I walked into a different Albertsons somewhere else in town, and that guy's there and he's like, hey, and he remembers me. And now there's this human connection happening, right? Um, and so, like, to make the space work for me, I have to at least do the best that I can to make these human connections, right? And that, I think that also comes from like living in the spaces that you're talking about for a good portion of my life in Central America and in Alaska too, where there's a lot of community orientation where, it's like you're always saying hi, you're always connecting, you're always sitting down and talking, and not only because of the architecture of an area are we losing our connection to our life force and to nature, but we're also not reaching out and making those human community connections. So yeah, I hear you. I don't it's not the ideal life, you know. And for some people it is all they've ever known. And that just makes me sad. Like you start talking to them about nature and they're like, you know, they're at
Yeah.
nature's, taking a walk in the park and playing on the playground or something. It's like, wow.
And it's true, some people haven't experienced that. For a lot of my wilderness guiding experiences, people would be with me for 1 week on like an ecotourism boat, and we're going off kayaking and hiking every day. And it would usually take about 3 days before I would see a shift in people. First, a lot of people who can afford that kind of travel work a corporate job, they work 9 to 5 at least, they get 2 weeks off a year,
Yep.
and their body is, like, tight, and it's kinda disconnected to themselves, and it's connected to the world because to work that much at a job that you don't love, I think the only way to survive is to kinda disassociate a bit, to
Mhm.
emotionally handle that. If especially if it's something you don't really love, you're not a believer in it, but you're doing it for the money and the insurance, your kids have a stable, home and all that. But what I notice when people, after about 3 days and not looking at their phone, not looking at their computer, it takes at least that long to really drop in, to feel connected, and to actually I even noticed this, it seems as if it takes people that long to even fully see what
Mm.
they're seeing. At
Yeah.
first, they're totally in their head trying to understand, relate it to something they already know, or it's still that somewhat disconnected. But if they allow themselves to just really drop in and relax and breathe in it, I love that. I love witnessing that where people start relaxing more, they start sleeping better, they start being more sweet to their wife or their husband, and they start opening up and being more relaxed about making friends a- and feeling themselves more. And many times people get off the boat after a week and they'd cry.
Yeah. Yeah,
Full
yeah.
grown men, 40s, 50s, 60s, cry. Women cry because it was one of the best experiences of their lives to
Mhm.
be in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And it was such a cool experience to see that, like, wow, they were cracked open, and here I am, their guide to help bring them into themselves and into connection. And even if they go back to their corporate job in a week and lose themselves again, they will remember that they felt cracked open and so connected, and hopefully they'll keep coming back.
Right, like a mind once changed, can never go back. I mean, that experience is in your body. We talk about muscle memory and body memory, and oftentimes it's just couched in the negative, the trauma and the epigenetics and all that kind of stuff. But the good stuff is there too. Absolutely. And at the core, we are wanting to reveal that life force more for ourselves. We're wanting to have that connection. We're wanting to have that community. I mean, that's sort of the base part of the basis of my work is like knowing that an authentic human, that isn't just, completely shrouded in conditioning and uh uh you know uh inside the corporate building and the mini malls and the whole nine yards, right? Is that visceral animal that craves that connection, that needs that connection. And it kind of brings me to this other piece that I wanted to talk to you about a little bit and just get your, kind of pick your brain and what you felt about it. Because there was something you said about, and it might have been when you were sitting in that coffee shop we were talking the other day, and you were saying something about the wind blowing memories across your body,
Mm,
and you were just and so, one of the things that I know is that touch is, our sense of touch is integral to our psychological development, our emotional well-being, to our social development, to our sense of self, right? So the skin is basically like the nervous system inside out. It's the same part of our body, just two different aspects of it. And if we don't receive touch as babies, right, then there's certain problems that we can develop as adults. But as adults, if we're not touched and touching, our emotional well-being is really affected. And because this because touch isn't just about the tactile. I mean, it is tactile, but it's not just about me touching you, hand to body type of thing. It's that we're being touched by the world all the time. We're being touched by the air. We're being touched by, each other's energy. If but we can go into what that is. It's not mystic. It's just the way it is. And um so anyway, when you said that line, and then kind of given what are the tenor of the conversation so far, is like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, how do you experience that?
um, yeah, I think it's really important to get enough touch to feel connected. And both you and I have had experiences in other countries for long, extended periods of time, which I think allows for a different way of knowing when you really just immersed in another completely different way of life. And some communities engage more on a tactile level than others. And I'll give you an example. You and I know each other from Maui. We were both living in Maui. I lived there for 8 years. 5 of those were half between Alaska and Maui, and 3 were full time. And one of the things I love about initial interactions with people in Maui is you hug.
Hmm.
Almost nobody shakes hands. And when I've been in Maui for a long time, leave island and go somewhere else, and I go to the land of shaking hands, I feel really sad. I feel really sad because it's
Yeah.
also so disconnected. Our bodies are far apart, and it's almost this sterile thing. Like, I don't want to fully breathe your air. I don't want to fully feel your body. I just want to shake your hand at a distance. And when you just get used to hugging everybody, I mean, in Hawaii, you hug everybody.
Yeah.
And then traditionally, the Hawaiians not only hug, but they also put forehead to forehead
Hmm.
and breathe the other person's life force. That's traditional, that connection. Like,
Mm.
I am connecting to you. And so I always have these experiences where um, I have these big emotional shifts when I leave one culture to the other. So in Hawaii, it's that. And then in the villages where it's very much a tribal way of life, you walk everywhere. I've been to villages where there are no cars. I met a 50-year-old woman who told me she had never been in a car in her life. Um, where you don't make appointments very often. You just show up. And when you show up, that person embraces you in their home. You're never hungry. You're never thirsty. There's always someone to take care of you. And that feeling that you're never alone and you can just walk around and engage with people. And in villages, everybody looks you in the eye. They wave at you. They acknowledge that you're near each other. And in a city, and moving here, it's like
Right,
polar
yeah.
opposite. You almost pretend they're not there. And if you do engage, some people think you're crazy.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, I can have these culture shocks going back to my own culture I grew up in, but having been like super connected and then coming back and like, oh, I have to make an appointment to see someone. Oh, I have to just shake people's hands. We're not all just going to fully wrap ourselves in each other. I think there's something about that too, is like living a place where you trust enough that you're going to wrap your arms around people and just say, we're always going to do that.
Mhm.
Because in the end, we're all human beings having our own experiences, but in the end, we're human living in the same place. And let's honor that and hug each other.
Let's hug each other. You're a
Oh,
good hugger, by the way, just wanna say that.
oh, thank
You're
you.
the
You're a
best.
great hugger too. Just like, of
Yay.
course, like, yeah,
And I learned a lot of that from my dad, I know that. So I wanna just kinda see if we can shift that a little bit and talk about how that relates to, feeling the world around you as opposed to just other people, but how do that sensation. Well, you talked about a little bit in the beginning, but anyway, yeah, I don't maybe you're catching what I'm saying here.
I do. And just the first thing that comes to my head is I also spent a bit of time in India, a
Mhm,
couple months, and I spent time in two different ashrams. And one of the ashrams, we weren't allowed to use a fork, knife, or spoon. We had to use our hands, and we weren't allowed to talk. So for about 45 minutes, nobody's talking. Use hand gestures, and you use your fingers.
mhm.
And what they said was, if you touch your food before you eat it, your body adjusts to the temperature, the texture,
Yes,
really.
I love
So
it.
your body's getting prepared. It's
Wow,
creating the amount of saliva you need, whatever. It's like preparing that it's kind of hot
that is amazing.
or it's cold, and you chew it, and you're having that experience with your body and not getting diluted with like words and conversation and that disconnect where your body might get indigestion or whatever. Because if we're really connected, then we're going to feel more like naturally flowing with things.
Absolutely. I
Um,
love yeah. When I was in I got a little bit of that, not quite that profound, but when I was in, Palestine and Israel and, yeah, they'd just bring out big trays of food and put them on the floor, and it'd be bread and yeah, no utensils, no plates, just
yeah.
and in that case too, you're sharing that with a whole group of people. So everybody's digging into the same. I don't know, there's just something about that that I feel like is really powerful, and healthy.
Yeah. And I think too, when we're connected, okay, so I've filmed a lot in the Arctic.
Mhm,
Um, if you look at my website, farthestnorthfilms.com, uh, there's so many films about being on the sea ice.
mhm.
I really that experience starting in 2013 has dramatically changed my experience where when it's 40 below, you really feel what's going on all levels. And just witnessing other people and how they engage. But I would say that it brings it back to like when I think of like knowledge, knowing, wisdom, wise, it's your own lived experience.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so someone could say, oh, preparing for this trip, I recommend this, 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 and this. Well, everybody's different. And I think when you say, oh, I have wisdom, or this person is wise about this, it's really their own lived experience because you feel the knowledge in your body. Like, I know that I cannot have a smoothie and then go out on the sea ice because I'm going to be freezing because that's not the right type of calories. And
Right.
I need to eat like seal oil or whale blubber or, this and that. And then feeling that heat in my body when I adjust what I eat. And I very much felt that, especially when it's, 30, 40 below, that my decisions on how I prepared for that trip are very um, obvious. And so, yeah, that kind of brings it back around is that my career is based on interviewing the wise, the
Mm.
person that knows their wisdom through their whole body.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. That is, yes. And that's why I wanted to interview you, because there is definitely a wisdom that comes through. And, my experience of you, even though you're funny and happy and energetic, there's a central core that just kind of is like really grounded and very, I mean, we can use wise, mature, self-knowing, and it comes through quite nicely. I mean, quite strongly. And I would say I'm probably not the only one that that has recognized that in you. So
Mm.
so listen, we're coming up on like an hour here. And I just want to see if there's any last tidbits of wisdom that you'd like to throw out there. Uh-huh.
Is
There we go. Stay connected.
so in conclusion to talking about somatics, wisdom, wisdom in our bodies, feeling connected, um, and in the choices of wanting to be connected to authenticity, which I didn't really mention that word, but so what this is it's a red fox and it's a sea otter. And this is a ruff. It's meant to be sewn on a jacket and put here and worn in the Arctic. And it was made for me by a hunter that I've filmed many, many times and his wife. They made this for me and I love wearing it. And because I don't live there anymore, I decided not to sew it on a jacket.
Yeah.
But what I love to do is wear it out sometimes and just witness people's reactions. They can kind of tell it's real.
Mhm.
And then not only that, they want to touch it and then they're having this experience. Wow, a real fox.
That was a real live walking around animal,
Yeah,
breed.
when we started the call, you're like, "Oh, I thought I saw a dog." And I said, "Well, yes, it is. It's just not alive anymore."
Right.
And then when I wear this and I touch it, I have the memories of that hunter. We saw fox together. He didn't hunt that one. We saw a red fox on the ice, and that was my first time seeing a red fox on the ice,
Mm.
seeing it move and knowing that hunter, he's now about 75, 76. He's so deeply connected to these animals. He hunted this animal for me, and him and his wife sewed it together. And their love and their connection and their wisdom,
Mm.
now I get to enjoy it on my shoulders and touch it and have that connection. And that connection is so healing if we can keep ourselves connected and remember how and why it's so important to engage on a full body level with our environment and others. I think that's going to lead to a much better life
Mm,
because we're feeling
mhm.
throughout when things are in balance. So,
Full consciousness re-evolution back to our
yeah,
natural state. Yeah, yeah. God, thank you, Sarah, do you wanna say something about your website and how people can contact you?
sure. Yeah, so the website I've had the longest is farthestnorthfilms.com. It's has different tabs. You can watch my feature length films. I have 3 on there. You'll see a tab for that. You can see a tab that says shorts. I have many shorts, probably over 80 at this point. And then depending on your interests, these are films that are not designed and made for you to be sensationalized. They're more ethnographic. So if you really want to dive into the
Mhm,
knowledge of someone in different ways in different cultures, you can look through. There's Tlingit Native region, there's Inupiaq, so out on the Arctic, there's Athabascan, interior Alaskan. Some of them are language immersion as well, bilingual. If you're interested in hunting or if you're interested in plant medicine, uh, um, you can look at those different categories. And yeah, all my films have been nonprofit, so they're viewable online. Most of them are on YouTube, not my channel, but my clients, some on mine. And then I have another website, wisdomkeepermedia.com. That one's a newer website. There's my latest film, Breath of Aloha,
mm,
um, that is on Hawaiian Airlines right now. And I'm going to be showing that at the first film festival after producing that on June 6th in Maui. So if anyone's in Hawaii, you can watch that at the World Whale Film Festival on June 6th from 4:30 to 9 is that film festival. So those are the two best places to look for my films, and I hope you enjoy them. And if you're interested in other ways of life, that's a great place to go, especially most of them are based in Alaska.
mm. Well, thank you, Sarah. I really, appreciate this bit of time getting to know you a little bit better and finding out more about you, and I did click through your Farthest North Films website, and it's beautiful. I didn't know about the Wisdom Keeper one, so I'm gonna immediately go to that. So,
Cool.
all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Mahalo.
Mahalo.